Hey everybody, Scott here. So I came across a poll on an internet forum for photographers, and I was giving this poll's question quite a bit of thought over the last few weeks and thought it would make a pretty interesting video. And so a question a lot of photographers ask, and the reason that they come to places like YouTube looking for advice videos and looking for inspiration and looking for maybe like-minded or different-minded photographers is they're asking, what do I need to do to be better? And often what they're really asking is, I follow X, Y, or Z person and I want my work to look more like theirs, or I have some inspiration and I'm trying to figure out how to get from A to B. How do I do that? And so they come on to the internet, to Reddit, to YouTube, to internet forums based on photography interests, and they start asking questions. And there are a lot of different answers that are appropriate for a person depending on where in their journey they are. It's about meeting that person with appropriate advice for their skill set and also their knowledge set. So, I may tell you how to do something that you are capable of doing, but you may not understand why you should be doing it. And so there's a knowledge gap there. So I just want to run through these questions real quick. So it was presented in the form of a poll, and these were the options. And I added one because I didn't think the poll was enough. So these are the questions I was considering. Taking more photographs, spending more time looking and critiquing your own work, spending more time post-processing your own work, looking at images of renowned or other successful photographers, attending a workshop, either somebody you like the work of, or maybe a workshop that will take you to a location of works that you've seen and have enjoyed, and you think maybe there's some inspiration that could be gleaned by getting to that spot in the world, or buying an additional piece of gear. And so, look, this whole video is titled "The Best Way to Improve Your Photography." And I will put what I think, if you had to say one thing that would resonate and improve the majority of photographers who might come across this video, that's going to be at the very end of the video. There are timestamps, like always. You can jump. I don't care if you jump. I think it's worth listening to this whole video, though. So those are the questions, right? Are we working more on ourselves? Are we looking outward? Are we attending a workshop or a class? Are we sitting behind our desk more in a post-processing software? What is the thing that I can use my time, money, and resources to get better and to do it most efficiently? Let's talk about that today. So today we're going to rely really heavily on an idea called the 4 stages of mastery, or the 4 stages of learning. You may have heard it called one of those two. And the idea is that typically within building a skill, you will fall within one of these 4 stages from the time that you first have the idea that you want to do this thing to the time that you become like a true master at it. So the first of the 4 stages is known as unconscious incompetence. Unconscious incompetence is having an idea that you want to do something and you don't really know anything about that thing yet. So in photography, this would simply be, I saw an amazing photo and I had a fleeting thought of, what if I got into photography and what if I could take a photo like that one day? You haven't read anything, you haven't learned anything. You just have the idea planted like a seed in your mind that maybe this could be something that you want to do. And it could maybe be something that you're capable of doing. That's also important. I would love to dunk a basketball like Michael Jordan, but I will never advance past the unconscious incompetent stage of merely wanting to dunk a basketball like Michael Jordan. It doesn't matter how hard I work, I will never achieve his level of mastery. And so there has to be a little bit of thought put into, do I really have the stuff that it takes to make it through these stages and to be successful? More often than not, with a skill, you can power your way through it to a degree. There are certain things that may require you to have an innate ability or an innate predilection towards something. I don't really think photography is one of them. I think if you want to be considered one of the greats and one of the masters, there's a certain je ne sais quoi that you need to possess, just a way that you can feel a scene versus approaching it very mathematically in a way that still comes across through the viewer, but comes across more as an emotion, an intangible thing that your work pushes into and onto the viewers. So unconscious incompetence, that's where we all start. We've all seen a photo that was a spark to the flame that becomes full-on interest in photography. So the one thing that you need to take a mental note of if you are finding yourself in stage 1, unconscious incompetence, does thinking about yourself being a photographer in the future give you an excited feeling? If the answer is yes, then we're going to take the first step in proceeding to stage 2. So how do we get started if we find ourselves in stage 1? We know we're interested in photography. What do we do next? Well, you can't be a photographer if you don't have a camera. This could be a cell phone for a lot of people, and many photographers start this way. They kind of try to push the boundaries of what their cell phone can do, and then when they find that their cell phone isn't adequate, they decide they want to upgrade to a full camera, and away they go. I personally recommend, when folks approach me with this type of question, I recommend that they buy a decent camera and a kit zoom lens, something like a 24-105 f4 lens and a decent camera to put behind it. You don't want a camera that's so old that it gets in your way from the get-go. I would highly recommend you buy a camera that has an electronic viewfinder, not an optical viewfinder, because that is dead and ancient technology. We're moving on from that. Get you a decent camera that's got a decent EVF and a good kit lens, and then start looking at photos that you enjoy. A big part of this is like, well, what sparked that original bit of joy? And then you can take the zoom lens and you can look at a photo and you can go, okay, I really like how they framed this shot up. And you can even put that shot on your phone. You can go out in the world and you can play with different focal lengths on your zoom lens until you like, okay, well, I can see kind of how you would get to this shot. Maybe you shoot it at 75 millimeters and, you stand this distance away from the subject, and it gives you sort of this jumping off point that's very flexible, and it allows you to develop your own artistic eye and to understand what focal lengths really resonate with you artistically. Maybe some don't, and maybe some do. And having this kit lens will kind of be a stepping stone for your next purchase, which, might be a prime lens with a much more shallow depth of field to give you a more artistic looking photo. And that way you're not buying a bunch of prime lenses, shooting ones that you don't like. You can kind of narrow that in during stage 1 with your zoom lens as you start to begin your journey. All right. So stage 1, we've exited. Photography is more than just an idea. Now we're at stage 2. This is conscious incompetence. This is the stage where you start and you go, I have no idea what I don't know in this realm. And that quickly shifts to, I have some idea of what I don't know in this realm. And that can feel overwhelming. It can cause a lot of burgeoning photographers to put down their camera and never pick it up again, because the vast possibilities that a camera gives you can feel just crushing to someone who doesn't, and can't discern left from right. And so maybe, you've been told by your friend who's a pretty successful photographer, you really need to shoot raw photos. The best way that, you can shoot and edit photos is to start with a raw photo. But you shoot raw photos, you open them up, they look gray and dingy. The software to edit them is somewhat overwhelming. So you go, I don't want to do that right now. I'll just stick with JPEGs. I'll just shoot JPEGs for now. And I'll lean on maybe some JPEG profiles that my camera provides for me. And you do that for a while. And you don't quite understand how aperture and shutter and ISO all tie together. And so you just put the camera on auto mode or P mode. and you just shoot in auto mode and you shoot JPEGs, and the stuff that you're getting is probably better than the stuff you may have gotten on a cell phone, but it doesn't look anything like the photos that originally sparked your interest in photography. They don't look special. And so you're wondering, you're like, oh my gosh, I was asking this guy for advice and he said I should buy this camera and I should buy this lens, and I went and dropped $1,000 on this. It's like buying a second phone. And now I'm getting photos that I feel like anybody could have taken. There is so much room for discouragement within stage 2. This is the stage where you kind of have to just put your guard up and power through and understand that you're going to suck for a while. And to get through the suck just requires reps. It's just like working out. When you first start working out again, it sucks and your body is screaming and it's hard to move for 2 days after a hard workout. That is the early stages of stage 2. You're just starting. There's so much friction. Everything is trying to get you to stop doing this thing, but you just got to keep going. And so that's where repetition really comes in. So here's the best thing I think you can do if you're finding yourself in stage 2 and you're really having kind of a hard time understanding the moving parts of your camera. You're going to buy a book called Understanding Exposure by Brian Peterson. This is a book that's been around for quite a while. It's been through several revisions, and I think it's the single best text anybody who's interested in photography can pick up to take them from a point where they don't really understand exposure to where they really have a mastery of the exposure triangle. If you don't understand how aperture and shutter and ISO really work together, how they push and they pull each other, how you can lean on one to affect the other, how you can use them to elicit certain moods, you're going to read Understanding Exposure and you're going to reread it and you're going to reread it until it makes total sense and the exposure triangle just becomes a second nature idea in your mind. This is so important for getting past the conscious incompetent stage of photography, the knowing what I don't know. If you know what you don't know, you can go learn it. And that makes getting past this hump easier. So the more we realize that we don't know, the better we can become. Now, you can fall into a trap here. What I have noticed is the vast majority of commenters on sites like Reddit in the photography subforums are pretty much all stuck in stage 2, and they're giving advice to each other, which is terrifying and ill-advised. You need to be very careful who you get and take advice from while you're in stage 2. Generally, a photographer will have gotten into this by either being inspired by somebody or knowing somebody personally, and they can lean on that person a little bit during this journey. And that's what I would encourage, almost like this mentor type relationship. If you can forge one with somebody who you think, their work is beyond yours and they have something to offer you, if they're willing to help you, that is far better than just going to Reddit and asking a question. I cannot tell you how many times I have seen a patently wrong answer upvoted in mass because the people who are upvoting it also really don't know the answer, but they're trying to appear smart and they're trying to appear like they know the answer. It's toxic. It's bad for new photographers. Do not recommend. If you can forge a mentor type relationship, that's the way to go. So what are the most important things that we need to be learning in stage 2? We need to learn the exposure triangle inside and out. We need to learn how priority modes work, aperture priority, shutter priority. We need to understand manual mode. We need to understand ISO, auto ISO. We need to understand how to use aperture to draw focus of the viewer to a particular spot in the photo. We need to understand how to use shutter speed to imply the exact sense of motion that we want the viewer to feel. And if we don't understand the exposure triangle, we can't get there. This is a crucial part of going from just snapshots to creating a photo, to making a photo, to making art. We're doing it with intention. We're not just pushing the shutter button and letting the camera decide all of the different parameters. Anybody can do that. And if you're feeling kind of bad about your photos, that's probably what you're doing too. So getting a learning resource that we can trust is paramount. Also, learning your autofocus modes on your camera. If you're an autofocus shooter, this is super important. You need to learn every little tweak so that you're not fighting your camera to get the shot. If a decisive moment appears, you know how to use your camera to get the shot. So in stage 1, we didn't know anything. By the end of stage 2, we should have a really good idea of every element of exposure and every element of getting a photo in focus. If you can do those 2 things, you're ready to move to stage 3. All right, on to stage 3, conscious competence. Now we know we have some skills. Now we know how to use our camera, and we know that we know a lot of things. We know all of those skills that we've picked up along the way, and we're starting to figure out how to use those. These are all great things. But maybe you're finding that your photos still don't have that something of those originals that inspired you. You're still missing out on something. You moved your camera from shooting just JPEG. Now you're shooting RAW plus JPEG. You've got the JPEGs there sort of as an escape hatch, but you want to learn how to shoot RAW. And so you start bringing RAW files into a photo processing software. You downloaded some trials of Lightroom and Capture One and DxO, and you're finding all of them are very different and they all behave differently. And it's sort of overwhelming. And you're hitting a new speed bump. And it's even more frustrating because you've put all of this work in. You've learned so much. You've come so far. And now you have to sit behind your computer for hours to practice, to make a style all your own out of nothing. You've probably heard the 10,000 hour mantra. You know, it takes 10,000 hours of repetition and practice to truly master something. Stage 3 is the 10,000 hours. Stage 3, conscious competence, is putting your head down, getting behind your computer, and grinding, okay? Things that suddenly become kind of important in stage 3. Having a good monitor on which you are editing your photos. I see this a lot. People just go have a run-of-the-mill, way too bright monitor that doesn't show a wide gamut of colors. It blows highlights. They have a hard time seeing blacks. And the output from those monitors are either too dim or too bright. They really don't have sort of a good baseline of what to do here. So you start researching photo editing monitors. You start going down that rabbit hole. That is a rabbit hole. You also need to choose a single post-processing application in stage 3. So when you're putting your 10,000 hours in, you're putting it in against a common piece of software that, you know, things that you learned 3 years ago are still applicable 3 years later. You're building layers up, up, up. You're taking one step up Mount Everest at a time. So I would go download the trials and I would see which system seems to work best for you. Which one does your mind resonate with the best? For me, that was Lightroom years and years and years ago. I've been using Lightroom since version 4. So I have over a decade of experience with Lightroom. And all of the things I learned day 1 in Lightroom are still applicable. And there's so many more things that Adobe has added to Lightroom that I've learned over the years. And it's been manageable because I've used that software the entire time. And I've learned those new things one bite at a time. And so if you can just get into an ecosystem and just start chewing on it and just start, consuming it one bite at a time, that's perfect. There is a trove of free learning tools available on YouTube where people will show you the ins and outs of your favorite piece of software. This is all free. You can buy guides, you can buy tutorials, you can buy one-on-one classes. But, at the most basic level, you can teach yourself anything that you need to know for free. And then you get behind your computer and you take this knowledge that you've built in stage 2, and now you're taking this new set of knowledge that you're actively building in stage 3, and you start editing your photos. You start editing RAW files. And you're going to find over time a certain style is going to appear. Maybe you like cropping your photos to 4:3. Maybe you like your shadows to tend a little bit green. Maybe you like your subjects to be dead center in the frame. even though that is not a classical rule of composition. You will discover preferences and you will discover ways of doing things that you probably wouldn't have done early on in stage 2. But now that you know more and you've seen more, you're more free to start bending the rules a little bit. And in bending the rules, that's where you as an artist are going to emerge. You've been, the goo and the chrysalis the entire time. We are working on forging the butterfly. When the butterfly comes out, that is the artist. That is true full intention. That is creating at your best ability and really becoming the artist that you knew you could become all the way back in stage 1 when you first got that little flicker of inspiration. So in stage 2, we learned how important it was to use aperture to draw focus to something, to use shutter speed to imply motion in a photo. You can do all the same things in post-processing in conjunction with what you captured in the camera. You can use gradients to darken everything that you don't really want the viewer to see, but still be in the photo to add something to the scene. You can selectively sharpen things or soften things to give certain illusions or, bring importance to something. There are so many possibilities, and it's post-processing is like learning a foreign language, and it's learning how to convey an emotion and convey an unspoken sentence or thesis or thought to the viewer. The scene is one thing, the subject is one thing, but when we go and we stand in an art gallery, we stand back from the photo so we can take the entire photo in. And sometimes we get a little bit closer so we can go and look at the details and see if the details hold up where we think they will. That whole congealing of one piece of art is what stage 3 is all about. It's taking that raw thing that was kind of interesting or pretty interesting and really elevating it. So I got to see that. I want to get a little bit closer. I want to see a little bit more details. I want to fully consume this work that you've presented to me. And in consuming it, I get some idea maybe of what it was like standing there and seeing that and feeling that. And I have a texture, vibe in my head, or I have a smell or a sound. All of these things can actually come through a still photo. It's pretty cool. But being able to conjure those things is the alchemy of post-processing. So again, pick one post-processing piece of software, stick with it, use it for years, go get every free tutorial that you can find, learn the crap out of it, just beat on it after every session. And then soon you'll find you get home, maybe you've made some presets to get you close to what you want to do, and your post-processing time is actually cut way down. And you become really efficient and fluent at this new language to tell something through a photo instead of showing something through a photo. The other thing is you need to be looking through your back catalog and finding shots that really resonate with you. Often I've gone back 5 or 6 years and I come across a photo and I immediately recognize its potential. And usually that potential is something I didn't even see 5 or 6 years ago. It's something I couldn't see because I've been in the blacksmith. I've been smashing this red hot piece of metal 1,000 times until a blade emerged. That's the work that we're putting in stage 3. Back then when I took the photo, all I saw was the blob. But now that I understand the process of work and the process of refinement, I can look at this blob and go, I actually see a full idea here that I couldn't even possibly realize back then because I didn't have the tools, I didn't have the experience, and I didn't have the subtlety, of learning all of these things. I can go back to an old photo, I can apply what I now know, and I can pull a really nice image out of it. And so it helps to go back through your old photos and figure out what really does resonate with you. Because if you can figure out the raw canvas where you get home and you go, this is it. This is what I want to work on. This is the canvas I want to paint on, right? Then it becomes a lot easier to go out in the field and capture those canvases. And when you start to get pretty good, you're going to get to stage 4. And stage 4 is a lot of fun. So now we are in stage 4. We're in the realm of unconscious competence. we are now able to just pick our camera up, walk out the door, maybe even preset it to some settings. I have a rough idea of what I want to go shoot today. So I'm going to preset my settings, get really close to what I know. I can look up in the sky. I can see what kind of light we have, what kind of cloud cover, what kind of shadows to expect. I can pre-dial all my information in. When I get to the scene, I can look through the viewfinder. I can set up a composition where, like I said earlier, maybe I like cropping to 4/3. I'm going to need an extra bit off to the sides because I'm going to be cropping those sides in. So I'm going to pull back just a little bit. I'm almost seeing my computer and the whole post-processing, setup and workflow as I'm taking the photo. I'm going, here's some colors that could be enhanced to really pop this area out. Or maybe there's some really garish colors in the background that are going to be actually hard to process out. So maybe let me change my angle a little bit so I don't have to deal with that later. And maybe it won't become a deal breaker in post. Maybe I, won't hit a speed bump I can't get over in post if I just change this one little thing in the field. You are seeing the entirety of the start to finish process, and you're doing that as you raise the camera up to your eye. So look, I'm not saying I'm solidly in stage 4, but what I am saying is I've been in stage 4 while out shooting. I've entered that flow state and increasingly am entering that flow state. And I can feel a confluence of all of my work. Suddenly, it's like a curtain lifting, like you've set this whole table and there's so much possibility, and now you're lifting the curtain. And that's what it feels like in my head when I'm shooting a scene and, I'm seeing the entire start to finish flow. I know exactly how I'm going to post-process this image when I get home. I know exactly how I'm going to crop it. I'm capturing it in a way where it becomes the best possible canvas for that extra touch I'm going to add onto it later. I'm paying attention to colors and brightness and transitions and backgrounds and the whole thing. And I'm not even thinking about it. I just instinctively, I go, well, that's a garish background. Let me scoot this way. So, that element's not in the background, or those colors might be hard to post-process in a different way. Let me maybe change my exposure so that they're not so bright, in my raw file. And that way I don't have to fight to bring them down in post. I'm actually, I can boost them if I want, but maybe they're a little more muted. These are all things that are happening in my brain, but I'm not really thinking these thoughts. It's just, a flow state where those things are happening. And so the deeper we can get into stage 4, the faster we can make things that we're really happy with, the less work it takes when we get home to bring that vision to life. And then it's even possible, like I mentioned earlier, you can go take some older works and you can make some really stunning stuff out of them using all these new tools that you have at your disposal. You can see those old photos for the potential that they actually had and pull something really cool out of it. So in stage 3, you were probably buying some gear. As you worked with that lens, you were figuring out what primes you wanted to get. You were figuring out what apertures you like to shoot at. And so you were enhancing your kit. Once you get to stage 4, I think this is actually where the bulk of your money should be spent. You know what brand you prefer. You know what workflows work for you. Now you really want to dial in the efficiency of what you're doing. I have found over the years that having too much gear in the gear cabinet can be challenging up to paralyzing. If I have 3 similar lenses for the same camera, which one do I take out? And then I end up going, I kind of regret not taking the one I did take. So paring down your options actually frees your mind up to not be burdened with choices. And it allows you the simplicity of going, I just have this one thing I can grab if that's in the realm of what I want to be shooting today. And so then you can go out and you can buy the nice version of that thing. And believe me, the nice versions cost a hell of a lot more money than the beginner to intermediate versions. But that's okay, because you're not wasting your money. You know exactly what your preferences are now. You know exactly what you like. So you can go and buy a $3,000 lens and feel okay about it. That's cool. That's fun. There's something else I think you should do in stage 4. That's start printing your work. Start giving away your work. Share it with your friends. Share it with your family. Donate some art to charity. All of this work, it's not necessarily to feed the family. It may be for you. It may not be for others. But now you really have almost what could be considered a gift amongst folks who are more amateur. And I think sharing that gift, especially pro bono, doing photo shoots for underprivileged folks, stuff like that, those are all really cool things that you can do. And you can find somebody who's up and coming, and you can be that mentor that they need, just like maybe you had in stage 2. So that one thing that I foreshadowed in the beginning of the video, like I say, most people I think are in stage 3, or at least stay in stage 3 the longest of all the stages. And so by virtue of that, I think most photographers are somewhere in stage 3. They've got pretty good gear. They kind of know what they're doing, but they're just still trying to kick it up a notch to the next level. So the number one thing you can do is focus on your post-processing. I guarantee you it is the thing that is separating your photography from those photos that inspired you from the get-go. It is the thing. So go pick your piece of software, start learning, start diving in, and I promise you, if you dedicate time and effort into learning how to post-process well, those things will benefit your photography, tenfold, 100-fold. It is literally exponential, the improvement your photography can see once you know what you're doing behind the computer with a post-processing piece of software. So I hope you enjoyed the video. The article that I've written is considerably more succinct than this video. If you know someone who you think would benefit from the idea of the 4 stages of mastery as it pertains to photography, go down into the description of this video, copy that link, and just send that link along to a friend. And, once you start thinking about stages and where you're at, then you can really think about where you go next. And that's what this video is really meant to talk about. So I hope you enjoyed it. As always, thank you for watching. I appreciate every subscription, like, bell ring, whatever YouTube asks you to do. I love that you guys do that and that you show up to watch my videos. I appreciate you. Happy shooting. We'll see you next time.